America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Jordan Bruno, Vice President of Job Creators Network. Today we're speaking with Bruce Torres. Bruce is the Director of Communications for the American Small Business League and the author of God, School, 9/11, and JFK, The Lies That Are Killing Us and the Truth That Sets Us Free. Bruce, welcome to Main Street Matters.
Jordan, thank you. How are you today?
Very, very well. Hey, but our small businesses aren't doing very well with this big election that just happened. Case in point, Mamdani, Avowed person wants to seize the means of production, winning in New York City. From your vantage point as another small business champion like us at the Job Creators Network, what do you see as the big challenges facing small businesses in New York and across the country coming out of this election?
The biggest challenge in New York and across the country is the lack of awareness of how central to the life of the nation and the economy are big businesses. And as a former New Yorker, a lifelong New Yorker, I'm out in California now. But as a former resident of New York City, I followed the election, the mayoral election quite closely, and I'm not excited about him. I'm going to say supposedly winning. We could pick that up later. There is a question about the veracity of the vote count. But to stay on point here, New York City is a perfect example of how small businesses are getting squeezed out of existence, and that is not hyperbole. And I'll just say his election is typical of what's being foisted upon us. If he is indeed a tool of huge powers and money behind him, as I suspect he is, and I could name some sources and discuss that, it does not bode well for small businesses in New York City.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's my take as well. I mean, looking at his past Twitter feeds, his remarks, his worldview. I mean, I just saw a video yesterday of him saying that if landlords don't comply with his directives, he's planning to go in and seize their buildings. And if you look at what a massive part of the small business community landlords are, I mean, that's very, very troublesome. What do you see as kind of specifically some of the biggest threats he poses?
Well, I want to pick up on what you just told me, Jordan, because I just watched online a conversation between best-selling author Naomi Wolf and she and her husband, who's an investigator, to keep it brief, in their big conversation about Mamdani's win, made the point you just made, that the implementation of his stabilization plan, if I recall how they described it, the first step would be to drive out those in those buildings who don't have rent-stabilized apartments, because apartment buildings typically have some that are and some that aren't, in order, by neglecting them, and to let them run down so that they could be taken over. You just said Mamdani's threatening to do that. Naomi and her husband Brian were talking about, I think, private equity firms buying them. The bottom line is they described his plan as a real estate play. And it's synonymous with giant moves of giant money along the lines of, even, this is my interpretation, the destruction of different neighborhoods and communities by fires and by other floods that have all the earmarks of a huge move to capture land resources. So Mamdani is not who he has seemed to be, and a little bit of research proves that, or shows that, or indicates that. We'll leave proof to a jury in a court where people can defend themselves. But if I were a prosecutor, I'd say, hey, let's really look at this guy's background. Let's look where this money came from.
Yeah, well, the old saying is you scratch a socialist, you get a tyrant. But I think the more accurate saying is you scratch a socialist, you get a cronyist corporatist. And is that kind of your contention here that he is backed by private equity wealth that is going to enrich, him and his donors?
Yes, and he's the evidence I've seen is he's being put in there by even foreign money. So it's a la George Soros. It's a la some social experimentation. It's a la capturing and using New York City as horribly as his predecessors have recently, but worse, as his governor is encroaching upon the freedoms of New Yorkers as a state, but worse, as Governor Newsom in California, those kind of experiments to collapse freedom, to stand on initiative, to require all kinds of rules and regs, and it's it's unfortunate. It's a couple of decades now of Democrat leadership in New York City has really made the city unaffordable, and under the guise of proposing solutions, the smart money says he's really going to drive it into the ground. It's going to be it might become some place that uh, is, even though the many rich might leave, it might become a place, just for the poor, a real communist experiment where UBI, universal basic income, is not many steps away when you look at how scenarios might unfold about how his economics can't work.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as more as yeah, just really driving out an acceleration of what we've seen happen, as you said, over these last Democratic administrations, where the middle class is just pushed out and out and out, and they can just no longer afford there. So you'll just have the two types of, you'll just have the rentier class and the landlords. So it's a very depressing time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization, American Small Business League, and what your priorities are?
Thank you very much. 35 years ago, a man named Lloyd Chapman started suing various federal agencies to find out who are these small businesses that you say you gave small business contracts to. And
Mm,
what he found is that those contracts were going to big businesses instead. And then in 2004, he formed us, the American Small Business League, to continue the work of exposing the fact that every year billions of dollars in small business contracts go to big businesses. And here's what that costs us, Jordan.
mhm.
We are a small business nation, as I'm sure you are well
Yep,
aware.
yep.
99.9% of all businesses are small businesses. 1/10 of 1% are big businesses. Every year, the federal government is supposed to give 23% of its contracts to small businesses. And every year they say they do. And we even exceeded the goal. What Lloyd has found in our lawsuits, what dozens of congressional investigations have found, what the SBA's own inspector general has found in many reports, is that the vast majority of all contracts go to the 1/10 of 1% of businesses that are big businesses. In reality, small businesses probably get 3 or 4%. And what
Wow.
that costs us, right, is millions of jobs that don't get created because those companies are already big that get those contracts. But if small businesses actually got those contracts, they would create 2 million new jobs every year on top of the 2 million jobs that America typically creates. It would be an economic boom of huge proportions. And we are lobbying Congress, the members of the small business committees. Plus, we've created a database of about 1,700 candidates for the midterms next year. And we're writing them this information and we're saying, run on this, run to expose this. This will transcend Republican, Democrat, left, right. This speaks right to our hearts and our wallets, which is where we live on Main Street in the middle class.
Why? What is the reasoning? Why is it just because they have more power and more clout in Washington? Why are these contracts going so much to big businesses and shutting out small businesses?
These are relationships that were formed decades ago. It's just the momentum. It's just the steamroller going on as business as usual. The real red flag was raised, in my opinion, in 1961 when President Eisenhower left office and he warned about the military industrial complex. And he also warned about scientific contracts being given to a technological elite that could soon dictate policy. But it's got to do with the decades of these huge corporations capturing almost every dollar of federal contract expenditures. The fact that the f the federal agencies have different criteria, so there's a fog in which you can't really keep track of, well, what's a small business?
Mhm.
Because when this agency buys these kind of goods and services because it's that industry, they can buy from a company that has 1,000 employees, 2,000 employees, $20
Right.
million in revenue, and call it a small business contract because of that particular stipulation. And the contracting officers give those contracts to those big businesses because very often when they leave government, they go get hired at those big companies who are happy to reward that government employee, that government contracting officer with a job. And when a new administration comes in, they often they'll hire from those giant corporations into the agencies so they can continue to award contracts to those big businesses. That's just one example of the fog that exists.
So besides maybe streamlining that a little bit, are there any other recommendations that Small Business League puts forward to balance the playing field a little?
Yeah, Jordan, we have a project called Don't Cheat Women,
Mm.
and that website is don'tcheatwomen.com. And that we are asking to raise from 5% to 15% the amount of contracts that should go to women owned small businesses. And here's why: women are obviously half the population. They own 40% of all businesses in America. It's not charity we're asking for. They sell what the government buys. They employ over 14 million people. They generate almost $3 trillion in revenue, and they deserve that kind of economic fairness so that they could pursue political equality. When that figure gets raised from 5 to 15%, it'll push from 23 to 33% the contracts that should go to small businesses in general. That's assuming that someone exposes the fact that, hey, small businesses aren't getting these contracts anyway. What difference does it make what percentage you call it? But all things being equal, if you when we give more to women and the whole and more to small businesses as a whole, 3 million jobs would get created every year on top of the 2 million. But there's a really important point, if I have another minute, about
Yeah.
why to help women reach economic equality. Women are doing well economically by many measures. I believe they're graduating with more higher degrees than men. They're starting more businesses than men, but they need all the help they can get because right now, men earn and save more than women, which gives them more political power because they can donate to campaigns. They do more than women, so they've got more influence with everybody in office, and they can run for and win office more than women. Men hold
Hmm.
75% of every seat in the House, all seats in the Senate, every state legislature, every president's cabinet, almost that many governor chairs, and 90% of committee chair positions and party leadership positions are men. And
Hmm.
women have different values, different priorities. And when everything we can do to help them reach economic equality will allow them to pursue political equality. They'll win office and influence policy according to the strength of their ideas. Obviously, the ideas and everything have to be intelligent and, and compelling. But right now, it's 2025. Women are not economic and political equals in America. That's the point. That's the hot button. That's our foot in the door because if anyone gets excited about that, that lets us teach, well, the context of small business contracts in America is the fact that the federal government lets most contracts go to small businesses, big businesses, ripping off the small businesses that are supposed to get whatever percentage that they're supposed to get.
Hmm. Very interesting stuff. So, what would you say outside of New York, and the contracting issue is another one or two really big hurdles holding back small businesses right now?
It's piercing the myth that the federal government does anything for small businesses. Typically, people think of the SBA when they think of what does the federal government do for small businesses? Oh, the SBA gives them loans. Stop, break it down. The SBA doesn't give loans. It backs loans that small businesses can apply for from their local providers, and then the SBA will back those that it wants to or those that qualify. And when you read the literature, any commentary about small businesses and what your congressman says or what the administration says, you would think we would all think that almost every small business gets a loan or a vast majority do. No, there are 36 million small businesses in America. Every year, less than 1% get an SBA-backed loan. It's something like not even 0.2%. Less than 100,000 businesses ever get an SBA-backed loan. So the next time we see news reports at night about SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler ribbon cutting, doing a factory tour, talking about new loans and new for businesses, do a little research, find these facts, and recognize that's all confetti and balloons and a parade to make us think that the federal government does anything for small businesses because it doesn't.
Tell us a little bit about your book.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking. As the title says, God School 9/11 and JFK, the lies that are killing us, and the truth that sets us free. It's a deep dive into those four main topics and also many others throughout American history that exposes, unfortunately, the official story is a lie. And I present the evidence of to what really possibly happened. And it's also wrapped in my ideas about the nature of reality and spirituality that give me hope, that also reflect humanity's beliefs. This is why we go forward. This is our sense of life when we trust, have a little confidence, and try to love each other as ourselves. Why do things tend to work out? Why do things blossom and grow? Why is love the answer? Why should I do unto others as I wish they would do unto me? Because if we don't know who our real threats are, we're going to fall for their lies, and it's urgent to know the truth about these things. God represents religion, and to understand which of those might be a trap, which of those might be just commanding our obedience to have us follow in groupthink. School, it's an indictment of the public school experience, how it's
Why don't
got
you
to
talk a
do
little bit about
more.
that aspect specifically? Because Job Creators Network, we're trying to push the education freedom scholarships as much as possible as we can to get people to get out of these public school systems and take their dollars to private schools.
Well, thank you. In my chapter and then throughout the book, but really in the chapter called School, I show the history of public school in America, relying heavily on the work of an author named John Taylor Gatto, Gatto,
I don't know that one.
the, the Dumbing Down of America, his big book, The Underground History of American Education, and how in the 1800s, rich, influential people in the United States adopted the Prussian system of education to create obedient workers and citizens who would revere the state, who would revere authority, who could be reliable workers. And it has been I consider the public school experience through which 90% of Americans go, Jordan,
Mhm.
to be a crime against humanity. For instance, humans need freedom to indulge their curiosity, especially as children, when we are in a hyper learning state, as nature created us to be, these incredible imaginative things. If you didn't let a bird fly during its formative years, it wouldn't survive as a bird. If you didn't let a fish swim during its formative years, it could not survive as a fish. We do not let our children be free as human beings during their formative years. They graduate, and they have no instinct for freedom. They have no instinct for initiative, being proactive, and no confidence. Here's the last point about this, why it's a destruction of hearts, minds, and souls. Developing our judgment is the equivalent of a bird learning how to fly. To develop our judgment, we have to make infinite decisions. 10,000 a year, 10,000 in 10 years. By not being allowed to live free as children, kept inside, which is an abomination, children don't make any decisions of import. That's why they graduate at 18 from high school, go to college and have nervous breakdowns and need to go to comfort rooms with soft music blankets and stuffed toys at 18 years old, well past the age of adult viability throughout the history of humanity. That's some of the foundation as to we need new solutions
Yeah.
to raise our
Have
kids
you
and
heard of
educate
the
our kids.
professor Stephen Hicks from Rockford University in Illinois? He has a course, Philosophy of Education at Peterson Academy, that I've been watching. It's a lot of similar points as yours. I don't know if you've crossed paths with him.
His name's not ringing a bell. What are his
Okay.
major ideas?
Yeah, so his major ideas is exactly what you're saying. Concept formation. He's a fan of Montessori school, where it's more focused on the student rather than the teacher. He has just much more student-centered learning, seemingly similar to your philosophy, and talks, and his big area of expertise is postmodernism and the threat of the left, that inculcation. So I'd really recommend checking out some of his work.
Now I continue to study all of these things. I've got over the years, I've signed up for so many newsletters, different groups. I get hundreds of emails every morning into my feed about all of these things because I was a reader all my life, in love with American history, the biographies of the presidents, Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy. If I had another minute about my book, I would talk about John F. Kennedy
Go
as a
ahead, one more minute.
blaze.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Read all about my book at brucethetorres.com. The homepage is a list of amazing reviews I've had the honor to attract and earn, let's say. And the truth about Kennedy's assassination shows us the truth of his greatness and his grounding in the ideals of the American founding and how they can still inspire and save us.
Wow. That's an excellent place to leave us. Give us your URL one more time where people can learn more about you and Small Business League.
First, I'd go to that don'tcheatwomen.com
Yeah.
because that walks you into our world.
Easy
And
one
then
to remember.
also, right. And then also ASBL.com.
Excellent. All right, Bruce, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you very much to everyone for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Subscribe to salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for now.